Bentonville 911, what's the address of the emergency?
It's 608 Southeast 8th Street.
And I couldn't imagine going through that as a mother.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I'm speechless. I don't know what to think right now.
What do you guys want to know? Put the things around her neck and it tied it. And not.
There are some stories that stop you completely. Not because they are hard to follow, but because they're hard to accept. Because everything about them feels like it shouldn't be possible. Like the world you thought you understood suddenly reveals a side of itself that you weren't prepared for. And this is one of those stories. Bentonville, Arkansas. November 20th, 2012. A mother wakes up in the early morning hours and walks into her daughter's bedroom. Her youngest is still asleep, but the other side of the bed, the side where her 6-year-old had been just hours before, is empty. No open windows, no unlocked doors, no sign that anything had gone wrong. Just silence where a little girl used to be. Within hours, that silence would become the center of one of the most significant true crime cases the state of Arkansas had ever seen. A case that would reveal not just what happened that night, but how completely the wrong person can blend into everyday life. Right next door, trusted, familiar, welcomed into the family. This case is often referenced in discussions around child safety and community trust, and once you hear the full story, you will understand exactly why. This is a true crime documentary, and this is the story of Jersey Bridgman. Before we go any further, or drop a comment right now and tell me where in the world you're watching from. I read every single one. And if stories like this matter to you, hit subscribe. New documentaries go up regularly and you won't want to miss what's coming. Now let's go back to Bentonville and talk about everything that led to that empty bed. To really understand what happened in Bentonville, you first have to understand the place itself. Arkansas sits in the heart of the American South, and if you've never been, the easiest way to describe it is this. It looks exactly like what most people picture when they imagine the phrase, real America. Quiet roads cutting through thick forests. Small towns where everybody knows their neighbors. The Ozark Mountains stretching across the northwest corner of the state, green and unhurried, dropping into valleys where life moves at its own pace. Hot springs, clear rivers, trails that seem to go on forever. It's the kind of place people move to when they want to slow down. And in the northwest corner of that state sits Bentonville, probably best known internationally as the home of Walmart's global headquarters, but otherwise it's just a mid-sized American city where neighborhoods are close, kids play outside after school, and the idea of something truly terrible happening feels far away. That's where Jersey Bridgman lived. And by the fall of 2012 she was 6 years old, but her story, the full story, started long before that November night, and the beginning alone is difficult to sit with. Jersey's parents, David and Desiree Bridgman, had separated and were sharing custody of their daughter. On her mother's side, life was stable, normal, the kind of environment that a child needs. But on her father's side, behind closed doors, something very different was happening. Investigators first became aware of a problem when Jersey's living situation raised serious concerns that required immediate attention from authorities. What followed was a thorough investigation that uncovered a home environment that had fallen far below the standard any child deserves. According to evidence gathered by Rogers Police, Jersey had been living under conditions that prioritized control over her basic comfort and freedom of movement. When detectives questioned her father, David, he claimed his intentions had never been to cause harm. He said he had been worried about Jersey moving around the house unsupervised at night. Detective Larry Taylor later recalled that David admitted the situation had started small and gradually escalated over time. He and his girlfriend Jana had apparently discussed safer alternatives but claimed financial difficulties prevented them from following through. So instead of finding a proper solution, they chose one that fell seriously short of what Jersey needed and deserved. And when Jersey began showing signs that something was wrong, the response wasn't to stop. It was simply to adjust. By the end of 2011, both David and Jana were taken into custody. The legal process moved forward and both ultimately pleaded guilty to charges related to how Jersey had been treated inside that home. David received 18 years in prison. Jana received 12, with an additional 3 years added later after a suspended sentence was revoked. For Jersey, it meant she would never return to that house again. She went to live permanently with her mother, Desiree. She enrolled at Sugar Creek Elementary School in Bentonville. And by all accounts, something in her began to settle. Teachers noticed it. Family members noticed it. Even neighbors who barely knew her picked up on the quiet shift happening in this little girl who had already been through more than most people face in a lifetime. People who knew Jersey described her consistently in the same way. Warm, bright, full of energy that seemed almost impossible to contain. She lit up rooms without trying. She took her role as a big sister to 2-year-old Leah incredibly seriously, watching over her, caring for her, showing a tenderness that seemed beyond her years. One family friend said it best, and simply, "I honestly don't know how she made it through all of that." But she did, and she was always smiling. In March of 2012, Desiree moved the family into a house at 608 Southeast A Street in Bentonville. New address, fresh start, a chance finally to build something stable. And right next door lived a young married couple, Amanda and Zachary Hawley. Amanda and Desiree became close quickly, the kind of easy friendship that forms between neighbors when life is full and help is appreciated. Zachary worked at a local restaurant, kept mostly to himself, and came across as relaxed and good-natured. He had no obvious red flags, nothing that made anyone think twice. Jersey called him Uncle Zach. And for a few months everything actually seemed to be working. A new neighborhood, trusted faces nearby, a mother doing everything she could to give her daughter a real childhood after everything that had already been taken from her. From the outside, it looked like the beginning of something better. It wasn't. By November of 2012, the arrangement between the two families had become completely routine. Whenever Desiree worked a late shift or her boyfriend Brandon had evening hours, Amanda and Zachary would look after Jersey and little Leah next door. It happened regularly enough that nobody thought about it anymore. It was just part of how life worked on Southeast A Street. A perfectly ordinary neighborhood arrangement built on trust, familiarity, and the kind of casual confidence that comes from seeing someone every single day. Nobody questioned it. Why would they? Jersey had just celebrated her 6th birthday. 6 days later, everything changed. November 19th, 2012, a Monday evening. Desiree left for work. Her boyfriend Brandon headed out for his shift, and just like they had done many times before, Jersey and Leah went next door to spend the evening with Amanda and Zachary. Completely normal, nothing unusual. Just another weeknight in a neighborhood where everyone knew each other. Later that night, around 11 p.m., Desiree came home from work and went next door to collect the girls. Jersey was drowsy and quiet the way children get when they push past their bedtime. Desiree carried them both back inside, tucked them into the same bed they had shared many times before, and settled in beside them. And then Jersey did something she always did. She looked up at her mom through heavy eyes and whispered that she loved her, to the moon and back, a phrase she used so often that it had become her signature. The small, sweet way she closed every day, those were the last words they spoke to each other. When Desiree woke the following morning and walked into the bedroom, Leah was still asleep. Jersey's side of the bed was empty. No note, no sound, no indication of what had happened or when. Desiree moved through the house quickly, checking every room, calling Jersey's name, opening closets, and looking in every corner a 6-year-old might reasonably choose to hide. Nothing. She called her own mother. Together they went through the house again, still nothing. That's when the fear became something else entirely. Desiree looked out the window and spotted Amanda sitting on the front porch of the house next door. She went over immediately and asked if Amanda had seen Jersey that morning. Amanda said she hadn't. Desiree called 911 at 6:43 in the morning.
Bentonville 911, what's the address of the emergency?
It's 608 Southeast A Street.
Police responded without hesitation. When a young child is reported missing, there is no waiting, no easing into it. Every minute is treated as critical from the very first second. Officers arrived at 608 Southeast A Street and began working immediately. They searched the Bridgman home room by room. They searched the Hawley residence next door. They moved through surrounding properties, checking every accessible space in the immediate area. No sign of Jersey anywhere. No forced entry. Nothing visibly disturbed. No broken locks. No open windows. Nothing that pointed clearly toward what had happened or where she had gone. And then Officer Travis Nichols noticed something. The back door of the vacant house 2 doors down, number 74, was standing open. Not dramatically, not obviously, but enough to stand out against every other property on that street. The house had been sitting empty for a while. That door had no reason to be open. Nichols approached carefully with fellow officer Mike Henson. They moved through the entrance slowly, scanning the interior as they went. The house was dim and still. Debris scattered across the floor. The kind of heavy silence that belongs to a place that has been forgotten by the world outside it. They reached the bedroom, and that is where the search came to an end. Officers immediately stepped back, secured the perimeter, and called for backup. A formal search warrant was required before the scene could be fully processed, so they waited outside and held the line while the neighborhood around them began to stir. Family members started arriving. Jersey's grandmother, Vicky, pulled up and walked straight toward one of the officers standing near the tape. She asked him quietly whether Jersey was inside. The officer couldn't find the words. He didn't need to. The look on his face said everything. Vicky said later that she understood completely in that moment. She knew before anyone told her. And that knowledge, arriving silently through a look rather than a sentence, became one of the most difficult moments the family would carry forward from that day. Jersey's maternal grandfather was later brought in to make the official identification, a moment no grandparent should ever have to face, the kind of thing that changes someone in ways that never fully heal. Within the hour, Southeast Day Street was unrecognizable. Police tape stretched across the block. Journalists arrived. Camera crews set up on the sidewalk. Neighbors stepped onto their porches in the early morning cold, speaking in low voices, trying to piece together what was happening just steps from their front doors. Official information was scarce. The atmosphere was thick with tension and unanswered questions. Near the Bridgman home, a small bicycle sat exactly where Jersey had left it, still patient, waiting for a child who wasn't coming back. A deflated princess balloon rested on the ground nearby. Small things, everyday things, the kind of ordinary childhood details that become difficult to look at in the wrong context. Bentonville Police Captain John Simpson addressed reporters and made one thing clear from the start. Everyone connected to Jersey, anyone who had spent time near her, anyone whose path had crossed hers in the days leading up to that morning, would be looked at, thoroughly, without exception. The investigation was just beginning, and somewhere on that street the answer was already closer than anyone realized.
We also know that the FBI is now in on the investigation with Bentonville Police to try and solve the case. Several people have been interviewed and 3 homes were searched in the neighborhood where Jersey's body was found. Police say even though no one has been arrested yet, the investigation is moving quickly.
I feel confident that we've taken steps that we need to take as quickly as possible, and I feel confident that the answers to all of our questions are within reach.
Even still, though, we are now 2 days out and details about the killing are vague. We don't know who exactly police have interviewed so far or really how they even know this is a murder investigation. They still haven't told us how the little girl died or if her body showed any signs of abuse.
Obviously, this case is too important for the family. It's too important for the community. It's too important to everyone.
Police also say the holiday weekend will not put any kind of delay on their investigation.
The neighborhood here really shook up about this. Well, the girl's body was found inside an abandoned house behind me. The house is difficult to see with the light, but it's behind these series of trees here. And police have been here all night. They're still here this morning. The chief here in Bentonville is calling this a homicide, and the work to find the person or persons responsible for this crime continues this morning. Here's what we know so far. Investigators collected evidence outside this house most of the day Tuesday after the 6-year-old was reported missing, then found 2 doors down from where she lived. This morning, we expect officers will deliver even more evidence to the state crime lab in Little Rock, and we've confirmed they're waiting on a warrant to gather more clues in this neighborhood.
We do have several residents of interest on Southeast Day Street, as seen behind us here. And of course, that residence is not the only one, and we're working on either search warrants or other methods to be able to thoroughly inspect those residences.
But there are a lot of questions that we have this morning, and investigators aren't saying much at all this morning. We're hoping to learn exactly what happened to this little girl, and we're also want to know how close officers are to making any...
In the hours that followed, Bentonville Police and the Federal Bureau of Investigation began working the case together. This was not a situation that could be handled quietly or slowly. A child was missing. The circumstances were deeply concerning. And right now, the list of answers was very short. What our investigators did have was geography. A small, contained neighborhood. A limited number of people with direct access to Jersey in the hours before she disappeared. And the kind of investigative instinct that comes from experience. the understanding that in cases involving young children, the truth is almost never far from home, they started methodically, carefully, pulling on every available thread. Desiree was questioned first. Detective Corporal J.C. Wiseman walked her through the entire evening in precise detail. When she left for work, when she returned, when she collected the girls, when she put them to bed, when she woke up and found Jersey's side of the bed empty. Her account held together completely from beginning to end. No inconsistencies, no gaps that couldn't be explained. Just a mother in profound shock, doing everything she could to stay composed long enough to help. Her boyfriend Brandon was looked at next. His alibi was verified quickly and thoroughly. Workplace records and co-worker accounts confirmed he had been on shift during every relevant hour of that night. He was cleared without complication. Then investigators turned to the couple next door. Amanda Hawley sat down with detectives and gave a statement that aligned closely with everything Desiree had already told them. She confirmed that she and Zachary had watched the girls that evening. She confirmed that Jersey had gone home with her mother later that night. Nothing in her account raised immediate concern. She appeared cooperative, visibly distressed, and genuinely affected by what had happened, and then it was Zachary's turn. 28-year-old Zachary Hawley, neighbor, regular babysitter, the man Jersey trusted enough to call Uncle Zach. On the surface, he came across exactly the way you would expect an innocent person to come across. Cooperative, willing to help. He handed over the clothes he had been wearing that night without being asked twice. He agreed to provide a sample voluntarily. He expressed visible concern for the family and answered every question put to him without apparent hesitation.
I remember looking at the time, it was 3:35. My stomach was hurting. I was going to Easy Mart to get some Pepto-Bismol.
He did everything right, on the surface. But his account of that night contained one detail that investigators kept coming back to. Zachary told officers that somewhere around 3:35 in the morning, he had woken up suddenly feeling unwell. Not wanting to disturb anyone in the house, he said he walked alone to the Easy Mart convenience store roughly 150 yards away to pick up something for an upset stomach. Surveillance footage from the store confirmed he was there at that time. He said he returned home shortly after, went straight back to bed, and didn't speak to anyone until morning. Taken on its own, that story is entirely possible. People get sick in the middle of the night. People make late convenience store runs. It happens all the time. But here's the detail that quietly stood out. That same Easy Mart, the one Zachary said he walked to alone at 3:35 in the morning, was the exact same store Desiree drove to later that morning to find Brandon and tell him Jersey was missing. In a case built on reconstructing a precise minute-by-minute timeline, that kind of overlap doesn't get overlooked. It gets noted, it gets examined, and it gets brought back to the person whose story that put them there. Zachary was brought in for a second round of questioning. His story didn't change. Calm, consistent, and firm. He felt sick. He went to the store, he came home, he went to sleep. He had absolutely nothing to do with what happened to Jersey. Meanwhile, at the Arkansas State Crime Lab, specialists were working around the clock. Through the Thanksgiving holiday and beyond, a team of analysts processed information gathered as part of the investigation, working carefully and methodically through every available piece of evidence. The findings they were building toward had the potential to shift the entire direction of the case. Everyone involved understood the weight of what was coming back from that lab. Back in the neighborhood, the community was doing what communities do when something incomprehensible happens. They came together. More than 100 people gathered at the Children's Advocacy Center for a candlelight memorial. They stood in the November cold, shoulder to shoulder, holding small flames in the dark. The atmosphere was heavy and quiet in the way that grief in public always is, people searching for something to say and mostly finding that silence is the only honest response.
We just wanted to maybe find a way to process our grief and probably a lot of sadness that the community feels and a lot of the questions that we all have that we don't have any answers to today, and just felt like that this would probably be an appropriate way to do that.
Beverly Engel, the center's executive director, spoke about Jersey in the way that only someone who had actually known her could. Jersey had something special about her, she said. It was like she had this little old soul inside her. But at the same time, she was pure joy. Students and staff at Sugar Creek Elementary chose to wear purple in her memory. A color. A gesture. A small, dignified way of saying her name out loud when words felt insufficient. Jersey's father, sitting in a prison cell hours away, was denied permission to attend her funeral. As the days passed, the investigation continued to narrow its focus. Zachary Hawley's name kept surfacing in ways that were difficult to set aside. His movements that night, his relationship to the family, the late-night store run, the sample he had provided. Every piece of the picture was being examined, cross-referenced, and held up against everything else investigators knew. Then two developments arrived in close succession and changed everything.
So just to be absolutely clear, Zach, you've made a decision on your own to do this polygraph, and I'm assuming for the purpose of trying to clear your name.
Yes, I want you to find the person who did this.
First, Zachary voluntarily reached out to investigator Chris Moffat and offered to take a polygraph examination. Law enforcement agreed, and the test was administered. 3 days later, the results came back. Second, and this was the development that truly mattered. The analysis from the evidence gathered during the investigation was completed at the state lab. Those results pointed in one direction. Zachary was brought back in for questioning one final time, but this conversation was fundamentally different from every previous one. Investigators walked in with specific information, details about the scene, details about the evidence, information that had been deliberately kept away from every press conference, every media report, and every public statement since the beginning of the case. Details that only one person could possibly know, because only one person had been there. And somewhere in that questioning, something in Zachary Hawley gave way. He stopped holding his account together. At a critical point during questioning, he provided investigators with a layout of the interior of the vacant house at number 74. He drew it himself, marked the hallway, indicated the bathroom, showed investigators exactly where he had been that night. That's the hallway. There's the bathroom right here. The words of a man who had been inside that house, a man who knew what had happened inside those walls, a man who could no longer maintain the distance between himself and the truth. Zachary Hawley was placed under arrest. The community reaction was immediate and raw, because this was not a stranger. This was not someone who had appeared out of nowhere. This was the man people had watched standing behind the police tape in the early morning hours of November 20th, wearing a blue striped beanie and a black jacket, watching the scene unfold alongside everyone else. This was the man who had helped search for Jersey when she was first reported missing, the man who had sat with the family, the man who had been trusted, welcomed, and relied upon, the man Jersey called Uncle Zach.
LR Bentonville police say 28-year-old Zachary Dwayne Hawley was arrested this evening, charged with capital murder, kidnapping, and residential burglary.
We're outside of his house this morning here at 702 Southeast A Street. His house is between where Jersey Bridgman lived and where they found her body Tuesday morning.
This investigation has been assisted by the Rogers Police Department, the Benton County Sheriff's Office, as well as numerous other local law enforcement agencies that comprise the Benton County Child Abduction Response Team. And the Arkansas State Crime Lab was instrumental in the timely development of this case and this arrest.
We didn't actually see any family members in the news conference earlier this evening, but we were informed that the family does know about the arrest. In fact, we saw Chief Simpson at the funeral home there with the family during the visitation earlier, telling them about the arrest which had been made, letting everyone there know that they were going to hold a press conference tonight. So yes, the family does know. However, we're not sure if any of the folks in the police department here tonight were actually family members of Jersey Bridgman. Back to you.
Charged with serious offenses carrying the heaviest penalties available under Arkansas state law, Zachary Hawley was taken into custody and the case moved into its next phase. One day before his first scheduled court appearance, while being held in the county jail, an incident occurred involving another inmate who had managed to enter his cell during a routine distribution. The situation was contained quickly and no serious injuries resulted, but the mere fact that it happened reflected just how charged the atmosphere had become. Jail Captain Chris Spark addressed it directly. Obviously, this case has received massive media attention, and all the inmates know why he's being held, he said. We're going to do everything we can to make sure he stays safe, just like we would for any other inmate. It was a statement that captured the tension of that moment perfectly. A community consumed by grief and anger, a legal process that had barely begun, and a man at the center of it, all who had spent days standing among the people searching for the little girl he had taken. Bentonville was about to enter the longest and most difficult chapter of this story yet, and the courtroom was waiting. The arrest of Zachary Hawley brought no immediate relief to Bentonville. If anything, it deepened the wound, because now the community wasn't just processing the loss of a child, they were processing the identity of the person responsible, someone they had seen, someone they had spoken to, someone who had stood among them at the very scene of his own actions, wearing concern on his face like a costume. That kind of betrayal doesn't settle quickly. It lingers, and the legal process that followed would make sure the community felt every single stage of it.
Yeah, friends and family of Jersey Bridgman are gathered behind me here at Rollins Funeral Home for the visitation, which just got underway a few minutes ago. People paying their respects tonight include administrators from Sugar Creek Elementary, where Jersey was a kindergartner. Earlier today, teachers at the school broke the news to all the children and answered any questions they might have. Pam Blair, the school principal, says they did not provide much information to the students other than the facts that Jersey Bridgman died, and police are still investigating. Faculty members allowed the students to write and draw pictures about how they were feeling, which helped determine who needed the most intensive counseling. Blair says it was the older students in 3rd and 4th grade who had the toughest time with it. 35 to 40 students needed counseling.
When Zachary was escorted into the courtroom for the first time, he gave nothing away. No acknowledgement of the reporters waiting with cameras. No eye contact with anyone in the room. He moved silently under heavy security, dressed in standard jail clothing, expression completely flat. The tension inside that courtroom was immediate and physical, the kind that builds when a room full of people are all carrying the same weight, and none of them know exactly how to put it down. The judge read through the charges one by one. The charges filed against him were among the most serious available under Arkansas state law. As each count was read aloud, the room went completely silent. Observers noted that Zachary's hands were visibly shaking even as he worked to keep everything else about him still. He entered a plea of not guilty on all counts. A public defender was appointed. Bail was denied. Zachary would remain in custody until the case reached its conclusion. For Jersey's family, sitting through that first appearance was its own particular kind of difficult. Not closure, not answers, just the formal beginning of a process that still had a very long way to go. Before the trial could begin in earnest, 2 independent psychiatric evaluations were conducted. One was requested by the prosecution. The other was initiated by the defense. Each was carried out separately with no coordination between the 2 teams. Both reached the exact same conclusion. Zachary Hawley was mentally competent to stand trial. He understood the nature of the charges against him and was fully capable of participating in his own legal defense. That finding removed any procedural uncertainty and cleared the path toward trial. But the road still had unexpected complications. One of Zachary's appointed attorneys formally informed the court that he was no longer able to continue representing the defendant. He cited significant personal difficulties and acknowledged openly that he could not guarantee the standard of representation his client deserved. It was an unusual development, and it had immediate consequences. The proceedings were paused. A replacement attorney had to be found, briefed, and brought fully up to speed on a complex case. For Jersey's family, each delay landed heavily. Every postponement meant more waiting, more time suspended in a state of unresolved grief. More days were the thing they needed most. A conclusion remained just out of reach. A new attorney was eventually assigned, and the case finally moved forward into its active phase. The trial took place
Friends,
in Benton
family, and
County
even law
Circuit Court in
enforcement showed up to pay their
2015.
last respects for
Nearly
6-year-old
3 years
Jersey
after
Bridgman.
that November morning
Jersey's
in
funeral
Bentonville.
procession got a special
Courtroom
police
filled
escort
quickly
by the
each day.
Bentonville Police Department.
Reporters, community members, family, people who had followed this case from the very beginning and felt a personal stake in how it
should always
ended.
be remembered, no
A
matter
reporter
what.
covering the
Friends say
proceedings
6-year-old
later
Jersey
described
was a
Zachary
loving
as
little
visibly
girl.
on
She's
edge
been through a
throughout,
lot. She was
shifting in
very
his seat,
quiet,
clenching his hands,
but, you know,
alternating between
she
long stretches of absolute
always
stillness and
laughed.
moments where the tension
She
seemed
had
to
the
physically
biggest
push through
smile
his
that you could
composure.
have. She made sure
The
she
weight of
showed
the
you her
courtroom appeared to
teeth.
accumulate on him
And
with
she
every passing
loved
session.
her parents
Prosecution built its
and all
case
of her
carefully and
family
without
more
rushing.
than anything.
One of the most significant witnesses called to the stand was Frank Petty, who served as a key expert for the prosecution. His testimony was among the most closely followed portions of the entire trial, not because of graphic detail, but because of the quiet, measured precision with which he walked the jury through his professional findings. He spoke in the controlled tone of someone who has spent a career delivering difficult truths in demanding settings. "I understood the situation almost immediately during the initial review," he said. He described what the evidence showed, and what it meant within the context of the case. He pointed to findings that helped the jury understand the full picture of what had occurred inside that vacant house on Southeast A Street. He referenced small personal items belonging to Jersey that had been recovered and documented as part of the official process. Quiet details that underscored the human reality behind the legal proceedings. The courtroom went completely still. Some people looked away, others couldn't hold back tears. Jersey's family sat close together, holding each other in the way people do when the alternative is falling apart completely. Zachary sat with his head down. No visible reaction. Then came the evidence portion of the trial. Materials gathered during the investigation were presented to the jury, items and findings that documented what officers had encountered and what the official review had established. Even for people in that room accustomed to working difficult cases, the material was hard to process. A visible wave moved through the courtroom as key findings were presented. Grief and shock and something harder to name, the specific weight of being confronted with the reality of what had been done. As the materials were presented, Zachary Hawley showed no visible reaction. His face remained completely still. An audio recording or a portion of his police interview was played for the jury. Every pause in that recording felt loaded. Every silence between a question and an answer seemed to carry its own meaning. The room listened without moving. Then came the laboratory findings. Specialist Lisa Channel from the Arkansas State Crime Lab explained to the jury that certain samples recovered during the investigation did not produce a definitive standalone result when compared to Zachary's reference profile. However, she was careful to place that finding in its proper context. The material had been exposed to external conditions over time. That single factor, she stressed, was not sufficient to draw a firm conclusion in either direction and should not be considered in isolation from the broader body of evidence. Then senior analyst Melissa Main took the stand. She walked the jury through the laboratory results clearly, methodically, and without unnecessary complexity. Findings consistent with Zachary Hawley's profile, she explained, had been identified across multiple independent samples, gathered from more than one location during the investigation. He was identified as the primary potential contributor to those findings. She chose her closing words with the careful precision her field demands. "I can't say this with 100% scientific certainty," she told the jury, "but I can say with the same confidence that he cannot be excluded." In a room searching for clarity, those words carried unmistakable weight, not because they were dramatic, but because everyone in that courtroom understood exactly what they meant. Then came the moment that surprised nearly everyone in attendance. The defense called no witnesses during the main phase of the trial, not a single one. And in both their opening statement and their closing argument, Zachary's attorneys stopped just short of a full admission, essentially acknowledging to the jury that their client bore responsibility for what had happened to Jersey Bridgman. It was an unexpected and calculated move. Not aimed at acquittal, not aimed at reasonable doubt. It was aimed entirely at what came next. The jury deliberated. It didn't take long. Zachary Hawley was found guilty on all counts. Unlawful entry into a residence, unlawful restraint of a child, additional serious offenses, and the most serious charge of all, the intentional taking of a life. When the verdict was read, the courtroom shifted. Jersey's family held each other. Some cried openly, others sat in silence, absorbing a word they had been waiting nearly 3 years to hear spoken aloud in an official setting. Guilty. But the proceedings were not finished. A separate sentencing phase began. And this portion of the trial carried its own distinct weight, because the question before the jury now was not whether Zachary Hawley had done what he was accused of. That had been settled. The question now was what consequences the law would impose for what he had done. And in a case of this magnitude, that question is never a simple one. The defense shifted its entire focus. Their goal was singular: seek the most lenient sentence possible under the circumstances. To pursue that goal, they chose to lay out his personal history in full, starting from the very beginning. Childhood, family, the environment he had grown up in, and the systems that had failed to protect him from it. A representative from California's Department of Human Services took the stand and described a childhood defined almost entirely by instability. According to official records, there had been 15 separate investigations into Zachary's welfare as a minor. He had lived in 9 different homes. He had attended 23 different schools. 23. That is not a childhood with roots. That is a childhood spent in constant motion, constantly adjusting, constantly losing whatever small sense of stability had briefly taken hold. The caseworker who testified did something notable. She didn't just present the facts. She acknowledged directly and without deflection that the system designed to protect children like Zachary had failed him, that he had been removed from an unsafe situation once and returned far too soon, that stronger intervention had been available and hadn't been taken. Her testimony didn't change what Zachary had done, No one in that room believed it did. But it landed with a particular kind of weight. The uncomfortable recognition that broken systems and the people who emerge from them are often connected in ways that are easier to ignore than to confront. The jury listened to all of it. They weighed the severity of the case against the history of the man standing before them. They sat with everything on one side and everything on the other. The judge spent more than half an hour reading through the legal instructions, carefully laying out the standards the jury was required to apply and the responsibility they were being asked to carry. Then they deliberated, and then they returned. Zachary Hawley was sentenced to 20 years in prison for unlawful entry into a residence. 2 life sentences were imposed for the remaining serious charges, and for the most serious charge of all, under circumstances the court found to be especially aggravating, the jury handed down the heaviest sentence available under Arkansas state law. After the sentence was announced, defense attorneys moved through the jury one by one, formally asking each member to confirm that the decision was unanimous. Each juror said yes, the trial was over. The legal chapter had formally closed, and the community of Bentonville, which had been carrying the weight of that November morning for nearly 3 years, finally had the answer it had been waiting for. It didn't fix anything. It couldn't. But it meant that the person responsible for what happened to Jersey Bridgman had been seen, identified, tried, and held fully accountable under the law. And for a family that had already survived so much, that had to mean something. A verdict, even a unanimous one, is rarely the final word in a serious case. The American legal system builds in layers of review, specifically designed to ensure that the most significant sentences are examined from every possible angle before they become permanent. And while that process exists for important reasons, what it means in practice for the families involved is this. The case doesn't end when the jury stands up and leaves the room. For Jersey's family, the conclusion they had waited nearly 3 years for was about to stretch even further. From his place inside a high-security facility in Arkansas, Zachary Hawley filed a formal appeal of his conviction. His attorneys identified several specific points they believed warranted review. The first centered on a pretrial motion for a directed verdict on the unlawful entry charge, a motion that had been denied by presiding Judge Brad Caron. The defense argued that this denial had played a meaningful role in shaping the overall outcome of the case, and that the ruling had been legally incorrect. The second argument focused on what the defense described as a missed opportunity during the trial, specifically that the jury had never been formally informed of Zachary's willingness to plead guilty to one of the most serious charges against him. His attorneys framed this as a gesture of accountability that deserved to be placed before the jury as a mitigating consideration during sentencing. The third challenge targeted the admissibility of statements Zachary had made during his police interrogations, which the defense argued should have been excluded from evidence entirely. The Arkansas Supreme Court reviewed each argument thoroughly and rejected all of them. The conviction was upheld. The sentence was upheld. Every challenge the defense had raised was found to be legally insufficient to alter the outcome of the trial. From a purely procedural standpoint, this was a decisive moment. The legal foundation beneath Zachary Hawley's conviction had been tested at the highest level available to him in state court, and it had held. For Benton County Prosecutor Nathan Smith, the ruling brought a measure of closure that went beyond the professional. While additional appeals are common in cases like this, he said publicly, I hope today's decision reduces the likelihood that Jersey Bridgman's family will have to endure yet another court proceeding. It was a statement that acknowledged something most legal professionals rarely say out loud, that every new filing, every new hearing, every new round of arguments means pulling a grieving family back into proximity with the most difficult chapter of their lives. It means Jersey's name appearing in legal documents again. It means her story being examined and re-examined in cold institutional language by a people who never knew her. It means no rest. But the appeals did not stop there. Zachary filed again, this time under what is known in Arkansas as a Rule 37 petition, a post-conviction challenge arguing that he had received ineffective legal representation during his trial. The claim was that his original defense team had fallen short of the standard required, and that the jury had not been given complete information about his psychological history and the full scope of his mental health background. His attorneys argued that this missing context could have influenced the sentencing decision in a meaningful way, and that its absence had denied him a fair process. It is a standard avenue in post-conviction cases, common enough that legal observers were not surprised by the filing. But for a family that had already sat through years of hearings, delays, verdicts, and appeals, there is no such thing as a routine court filing. Every document that carries Jersey's name reopens something. The challenge did not succeed. The conviction remained in place. As of the most recent available reporting, Zachary Hawley remains inside a high-security facility in Arkansas serving his sentence. No successful legal challenge to his underlying conviction has been made. Sometime after the trial concluded, Jersey's biological father, David Bridgman, gave an interview from inside the facility where he was serving his own sentence. It was a complicated moment to sit with. Here was a man convicted of creating dangerous conditions for his own daughter, a man who had not been permitted to attend her funeral, a man whose own failures had already cost Jersey something irreplaceable long before November 2012 ever arrived. And yet here he was, speaking about her, about what she had meant to him, about the guilt he carried, about the way the news of what happened had landed on him even from behind those walls. He said he had never personally known Zachary Hawley, had only heard his name through others.
After his sentencing, Hawley spoke for the first time in his trial. He said in part, quote, "I sincerely apologize for the pain and suffering I've caused. I hope you can one day find it in your heart to forgive me." He was immediately handcuffed and taken into custody.
I'm going to keep loving my other ones, you know? I'm going to keep going on as a mom. Keep with my little girls. The other two. It has been pretty much an ongoing funeral. You know, we finally get we no longer have to remember a bad day. We get to remember, you know, our baby. We get to remember the good times. No longer have to focus on the nightmare.
When he learned the full details of what had happened, he said he struggled for a long time to process it. He spoke about his daughter with obvious emotion, not the rehearsed emotion of someone performing remorse, but the quieter, heavier kind that sits into someone who has had years alone with their own choices and nowhere to put them. He acknowledged that his struggles with addiction had seriously affected his ability to be the father Jersey needed. He said he did not think of himself as a fundamentally bad person, but he accepted, without deflection, that he had made serious mistakes, choices that could not be undone, a failure of protection that he would carry for the rest of his life. Whether that reflection brought him any peace is not something anyone outside of that facility can answer. What is certain is that it came far too late to matter to the little girl he was talking about. In the years following the trial, the story of Jersey Bridgman found its way into true crime communities across the country. Podcasts covered it. Documentary-style content explored it. People who had never heard of Bentonville, Arkansas, who couldn't have found it on a map, suddenly knew Jersey's name, knew what she had survived before that November night, knew who she was beyond the circumstances of how she died, and that last part matters more than anything else about how this story has been shared, because it is very easy, in true crime coverage especially, for a tragedy to consume the person at its center, for the details of a case to become louder than the life that preceded it, for a name to become associated only with loss. Jersey Bridgman deserves more than that. She was 6 years old. She had already faced more difficulty than most adults encounter in a lifetime. She had been let down by people and systems that existed specifically to keep her safe. And yet every single person who knew her, teachers, neighbors, family members, community workers, described her in the same essential terms: warm, bright, joyful in a way that felt effortless, the kind of child who makes everyone around her a little more present just by being in the room. She loved being a big sister. She took that role seriously with a tenderness that seemed beyond her years. She used phrases like "to the moon and back" because that was genuinely how large her love felt. She had just started to experience what a stable childhood looked like. A consistent home, a school she attended every day, neighbors who knew her name, a routine that felt safe. Simple things. Things most children never have to think about because they have always simply been there. Jersey had to work to get to them, and she was just beginning to settle into them when they were taken away. Tixierland, the community of Bentonville has carried this story forward in the way that communities carry the things they cannot put down. The candlelight memorial in those first raw days of grief, the purple worn by students and staff at Sugar Creek Elementary, the quiet, dignified way an entire neighborhood tried to hold itself together while processing something that made no sense and never fully would. Those gestures were not small. They were the community saying collectively and out loud that Jersey's life had value, that she had been seen, that she would not simply disappear into the case file that bore her name, and that impulse to remember a person rather than just a case is exactly why stories like this one continue to be told, not to dwell in darkness, not to sensationalize a tragedy, but because the alternative is forgetting, and forgetting is the one outcome that serves no one, least of all a 6-year-old girl who spent her short life looking for the safety and love she deserved. Jersey's story carries a lesson that is important and impossible to ignore. Danger rarely looks the way we expect it to. It does not announce itself. It does not stand apart from the crowd or make itself obvious from a distance. Sometimes it lives next door. Sometimes it helps watch the kids when you work late. Sometimes it stands behind the police tape with everyone else, wearing the right expression and saying the right things for days after. That is the part of this story that stays with you long after everything else fades. Not just what happened, but how completely ordinary the person responsible appeared to everyone around him, and how that ordinariness was itself the most effective cover imaginable. Jersey called him Uncle Zach. She trusted him the way a 6-year-old trusts the familiar adults in her world, completely without calculation, because that is what children do, and what children deserve to be able to do. That trust was not honored. And the consequences of that failure became a weight that everyone who loved her will carry forward for the rest of their lives. If this story stayed with you, take a moment right now and leave a comment below. Tell me what you think about this case. Tell me where in the world you're watching from. Every comment genuinely matters, and I read all of them. If you are not subscribed yet, now is the time. New true crime documentaries go up regularly, and every story we choose to cover is chosen for the same reason, because it deserves to be told, and because the people at the center of it deserve to be remembered as more than just a case number. Jersey Bridgman was more than what happened to her. She was a little girl with a warm smile, a big heart, and a phrase she used every single night before she closed her eyes: to the moon and back. Remember her name.